So I don't know how many of you know this, but I serve on a committee with the city called the Citizens Core Council. It's a group that's existence is basically around helping the average person in Brigham and the surrounding community be ready for some manner of disaster, incident, whatever you call it. One of our very first tests was last spring when we got that bit of flooding that we had around just about everything that way, really. And that was one of our first tests of kind of some of the procedures we had. And one of the things we realized that we were being real good about telling people to be ready for disasters, but not so good about telling people what that looks like. And I did that to you last week. I told you that we as Christians need to be ready for Jesus to come back. And I didn't tell you how. So I'm going to, right off the bat, right at the beginning of this sermon, I'm going to tell you how it works. So how do we get ready for Jesus to come back? We take care of the people that the world says doesn't matter. It's that simple. Sermon over, let's sing a song. I mean, I'm kidding, but it really is that simple. Jesus spends these several parables that are, the first one says, be ready. Be like the bridesmaids that have extra oil. And don't be like the bridesmaids that didn't bring enough oil and had to go buy some, but they were too late to get in. Be ready. And then the second one was the servants who were given the valuable coins, the tremendous amounts of money. And two of them took the tremendous amounts of money that they were given and they used it and they made more. And one of them just buried the money that he was given in the dirt and then gave all the whole amount back when the master came back. Two of the servants were praised for using what they had been given, and the other one was punished for not using what he had been given. Same kind of message. Instead of just be ready, it's do stuff. So we're supposed to be ready, and we're supposed to do stuff. And then finally, in this third parable, we hear what the expectation is of the stuff that needs to be done. And it's take care of the people that aren't being taken care of. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger. Visit the sick, visit the people in prison. That's what it is to be ready. Now you might be thinking, but Pastor, we're Lutherans. I learned way back in confirmation that we are saved by grace through faith so that no one can boast. Any of us remember that from way back in confirmation? I know it was drilled into my head. That's what being Lutheran really is all about. It's that realization that we cannot save ourselves. We need God to do it for us, and no amount of good works on our behalf will get us saved. That is true. That is completely and totally accurate. But the evidence of our salvation, the thing that shows that we are God's, possessive, not plural, that we belong to God, is the things that we do. James writes, how can I see your faith apart from your actions? I'll show you my faith by putting it into faithful action. Even Paul says, right after saying we are saved by grace through faith and not by works so that no one can boast, he says, for we are God's workmanship, created to do the good things that he has prepared in advance for us to do. We are saved in order to show our faith by our actions. And that's what Jesus is describing in this parable. He's describing the effects of being saved. And the effect is the thing that shows what God has done in our lives is feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, give clothes to those who need clothes, visit people in prison, care for those who are sick, welcome in the stranger. God's actions for us in our salvation inspire our action to live out that salvation. And that's what makes us ready. When the things that we believe, the things that we put our faith in, are shown in what we do. Because a couple weeks ago, remember, I talked about how believing in God doesn't really get us anywhere. Acknowledging that there is a creator doesn't really get us anywhere. But it's putting our trust in him, putting our faith in him, and having that show in our lives that proves what God has done for us. Now remember, all of these parables that Jesus are teaching are a response to the question, what is the sign of the end of the age? And boy, does Jesus tell them. And it gets to these three parables that really come as a set. The parable of the bridesmaids says, be ready. The parable of the talents says, do with what you are given. And then this parable of the sheep and the goats tells us what it is that we should be doing. And so Jesus separates the sheep and the goats. I always think it's interesting in this parable that no one disputes that they know the king. The sheep and the goats, they all know who the king is. No one is surprised that they're in front of the king. No one is surprised that they're being judged. The thing that surprises them is what they're being judged on. Because both groups are shocked that the thing that they're being judged about is, did you take care of the poor? It's a weird thing to be judged about. You wouldn't expect the king of the universe to judge people on that. You would expect the king of the universe to judge people on, the 10 Commandments maybe. Did you worship God? Okay, well, kind of. Did you take the Lord's name in vain? Sometimes. Did you keep the Sabbath? Oh, I'm really bad at that one. That's what we expect to be judged on. These are the things that we are taught is the things that we'll be judged on. But even if you look real close at Martin Luther's interpretation of the 10 Commandments, he ends up in the same place of this parable. Because in Luther's explanation of the murder commandment, he says, if you had the means to help someone in need and you did not, you have broken the commandment to not murder. Eek. Because that seems to be what Jesus cares about. He cares about these people who don't really matter. The poor. The world continually forgets the poor. How many of us try real hard to ignore the guy that stands by the no loitering sign at Walmart? I try real hard to ignore that guy. I giggle to myself because he's loitering right next to a no loitering sign, but I try real hard to ignore him, and people like him. Now, I justify it to myself all the time. I say, well, he's been there enough. This seems like it's just his income. I don't want to support that. I justify it to myself all the time, but at the same time, I wonder, Jesus didn't say, give to the poor only if you are sure that they're what they say they are. Visit the people in prison, but only the innocent ones. Go and give people clothes, but only if you're sure they're not hiding a nice suit in the back of their car. I think it's so interesting that these things that Jesus says, none of them are qualified. Did you feed someone who was hungry? Did you clothe someone who needed clothes? Did you visit someone if they were in prison? Did you welcome in someone you didn't know and might have been a little afraid of? Because whatever you do to the least of these brothers or sisters, you did to Jesus. And whatever you didn't do to the least of these brothers and sisters, you didn't do to Jesus. That's tough. It's tough for me because I want to be a good steward of the church's resources. As someone comes to me and they say they need help, but I also hear Jesus' command to do something. I don't want to enable something if I suspect bad behavior, but at the same time, I don't really want to be a goat. So it's tough. But I hear Jesus' words. If you didn't help one of the least of these, you didn't help me. Ouch. And this is what it means to be ready. It's to live out that attitude that Jesus has. There's so many stories in the Bible of Jesus helping people that, well, some people thought maybe they didn't deserve the help. When a woman came up and grabbed Jesus' coat because she didn't want to make him unclean, Jesus didn't say, "How dare someone touch me?" He said, "Someone touched me." "Oh, it was you." Okay. That was it. When a synagogue ruler's child was sick, Jesus didn't say, "Well, I need you to support me in the stuff that I'm doing before I go and heal your daughter." No, he just went and healed the daughter. When a Roman centurion needed a servant healed, Jesus didn't say, "Well, I'm not going to help you because you're a Roman." No, he healed the servant. When Jesus came across a crazy person who lived among a cemetery and yelled and screamed crazy stuff all the time, he didn't say, "Oh, you look a little weird. I'm going to just not." No, he went and helped him. And we might say, "Well, that's Jesus. He can do cool stuff like that." Well, so can we. Right? We can do cool stuff like that too. I took once a group of small-town Iowa high school kids on a mission trip to inner-city Nashville. These are kids who, most of them, the biggest city they'd ever been in was Des Moines. And here they are in inner-city Nashville. And the very first day they were there, they were given an extra lunch and a couple extra bottles of water and told, "Go have lunch with a homeless person." Every single one of those kids, by the time that 3 hours or so that we were wandering the city was over, said, "Wow, they're just normal people." I know that sounds like such a simple realization, but how often when we see someone who looks like they're in need, do we go, "Oh, they must be whatever"? But all of these kids, when they actually talked to someone who was homeless, walked away going, "It was just so normal." The thing that Jesus judges us on is not how much faith we have. It's not how much money we've given to a church. It's not whether we've gone on these grand mission adventures to far-off lands. We're judged on, did we help the poor? Did we feed the hungry? Did we clothe the naked? Did we give the thirsty a drink? Did we visit people in prison? Did we visit people when they were sick? Did we welcome in the stranger? Because that's what it looks like when we live out our faith. It's what it looks like when we live out following Jesus. It's how we get ready for Jesus to return. It's that simple. Because the call that Jesus has for us has always been to love God, but also to love your neighbor. And if you weren't sure who your neighbor is, then we get the parable of the Good Samaritan, the hated Samaritan, helping someone who needed help because he was there and they needed help. That's our call. How is it that the world will know that we are followers of Jesus? Well, Jesus says they'll know because we love. We love one another. And we love those who are hungry, who are thirsty. We love the naked. We love the poor, the strangers, the prisoner, the sick. We love anyone who needs some help. Any help that we can provide. Because Jesus says when we do something for them, we're also doing something for him. That is what it looks like to live out our faith. Not just to have it as something we keep in our back pocket and pull out when we need it, but something that is every day, something that makes us ready for Jesus. Why? Because that's what love does. Because that's what Jesus does. And that's what it looks like when we follow him. We do the things that he would do. Whoever needs help, whatever kind of help they need, it's just what we do. Because of our faith, and because it's just that simple.